So let me introduce to you Magno Neiva. He's head of compliance of Altenar, and he's going to talk about B2B licensing for the Dutch market.
Exactly. Thank you for that. Might sound a bit strange because we know that there is no B2B licensing in the Dutch market. But the reality, and after everything that we saw in the main stage, is it needed? Yes or no, it's a good question. So we can see why is it good or not to be licensed in a heavy regulated environment, even for all the suppliers. And in cases where there is no support from the regulator to impose this type of regimes, how we can help as a B2B the operators to work in a regulated market. As you guys know, in Holland, we have the B2C licensing. We saw in the main room continuous enforcement and the rules becoming stricter and stricter. The technical requirements are quite high. We have, and talking specifically about sportsbook, a very restricted list of events that can be provided to the operators, restricted bonus, complex data reporting. As you all probably know, the data reporting is always a problem when operators need to get data from sportsbook providers, data from game providers, so always, and data from the PAM providers, so always very complex to have a good reporting system. There is restricted advertising, and as it was always talked, a very high tax rate that just seems to go up and never stabilize. This is the current situation here. But if we compare Holland with other countries, there's also some nuances that make it even more difficult for operators to be part of this regulated environment. The enforcement that we mentioned before, if we compare with other countries that have 4 years, because that's the reality, in 4 years, the Dutch regulator, instead of passing for a period of educating, trying to support the operators, passed to a period of lots of enforcement. And this is not that common in most regulated markets, that they do try for a grace period, let's say, to make the operators stabilize their business and then develop. And then after that also start looking at some enforcement. We see that there is a very high cost of entry. We saw in the main stage there are not that many operators willing to enter the market because it becomes very costly to enter the market since it has higher compliance operational costs than most of the markets. We mentioned before the reduced event selection. When we look at other markets, other regulated markets, there is no, let's say, catalog of events that restricts the sports book, speaking in our case, that much. In the case of the Dutch market, we see more and more that operators, due to also to the reporting requirements, they decide to keep the offering very, very low. If you keep the offering low, less things to offer, more the operators will see as costs, and more the black market will grow because players want to get offers. Players don't want just to see always the same Champions League games there in the front end. They want to have more opportunities to place bets. They want to see different type of events, and that's very complicated when you can only work with a very reduced catalog. And what I was mentioning, there's also no B2B licensing. We saw across Europe that most of the regulators, after a couple of years, they did understood that one way to make the regulatory framework, the ecosystem more stable, was actually to start proposing either the licensing, or some of you also might know, the registration of providers, because that brings a benefit for the entire ecosystem, being that B2B licensees start absorbing some of these costs that you see. How can we help you? It's very simple. This applies either in a licensing regime, but also applies as it is now. We take care of the certification. When you look at you as operators that need to certify the sportsbook, when you use a solution like ours, you already know that it's going to be certified. You already know that the test labs are going to understand it, coming from other jurisdictions, and they're going to adapt way faster. That leads to a two-way. That is, once you get the B2B certification, you can use it in your B2C to make it faster. You don't need to go from 0 to 100. You start already at 50. Events restrictions. A negative thing, 100%, but we, as a sportsbook provider, we can offer a way to edit those event restrictions. So our tool, our iframe, is set in a way that you, as operators, can already choose your risk appetite when you set your own events. And that way it's perfect for you to always be updating your catalog of events, trying to match not to only regulatory requirements, but what your target audience wants to see. The data mapping, we saw that in the Netherlands there is a huge reporting requirement for data. We, as a sportsbook providers, we can give to operators the data cues that they need to make the reporting match with what the regulator needs. So again, way more cost effective. Events monitoring. When an operator enters the market, instead of having a huge sportsbook team, they can rely on B2Bs like us to have the monitoring, to be constantly checking everything. If there is a need to report, to talk with IBEA, that is IBEA always supporting us, and this can come from the B2B to support you. We do have also the thing that is called product stability. You do not need to think too much what you need to have in-house, because a B2B can definitely support you with that, and it's us that are responsible for the product to be stable, at least from the sportsbook side. Minimal customization. Another positive point of a B2B regime, either licensee or supporting operators, is that from your side, you do not need to do much more than selecting how you want the front end to be presented. The customization from your side, you don't need front end teams to go over it. You just need someone to say, we want with this color, this way, and put it that way. Again, more cost effective. Advisory roles. That is something, while I'm here also, is that we work together with you. B2C operators don't need to be thinking just because they are the licensed operator that they are closed in their silo and no one can actually help them. We do try, for example, looking at the events, to configure your front end in a way that is already compliant. We can give you the tools for you to make it more tailor-made to your needs. So all of these, looking back, are very cost-effective measures that a B2B can support you. And I just put your costly integrations, but this looks negative, and it's actually negative because everything here that if you don't use a B2B provider like us, for example, everything is going to become costly. I was mentioning all the time cost effective, but that's the reality. If you need to do all of these in-house, then you're going to spend lots of money in integrations with all of the data feed providers, doing the monitoring, working with IBEA, putting the restrictions. So everything comes with a cost. And if you don't have a good B2B provider, you're not going to manage to reduce that. So yeah, I kind of sold a little bit of what we do, but in reality, what we want to take from this meeting with you is that how can we, as B2Bs, and showing how we can support B2Cs, how can we influence the market to be better? We know that more regulators are introducing the B2B licensing. Probably here, sooner or later, is going to come to the agenda, and we need to be ready for that. And one of the best things to be ready for that is to follow the right examples. What do I mean by saying following the right examples? We know by now that some regulatory bodies across Europe did not start quite well when they started introducing B2B in their frameworks. So it's better that us as an industry, B2Cs that have a license, that want B2Bs to support them, also guide the regulator and explain them why it's benefit for us to have a full framework where everyone is responsible for each other's work. There is a cross-check between operators and B2Bs. And some countries worked incredibly well. We can talk about the example of Denmark, Sweden, that worked incredibly well in introducing a B2B framework, and that made, and I speak by experience, that made our operators in the region get way more money for value by working with us than following certain other regulatory bodies, like for example the UKGC, that probably everyone in this room is still questioning what is going to happen, for example, with the case of Evolution that is under UKGC scrutiny, to understand what is going to impact all the other ones. And probably this is also not the way of trying to make B2Bs the watchdogs of the regulators. It's better to make B2Bs the supporters of the business. So if we follow the right examples, I think B2Bs and B2Cs are going to work well together in a regulated environment. That leads to better products, less black market. And that's the reality that we also need to address. If we have a regime, or if we have a willingness from the regulators that understand the value of having suppliers supporting operators, there will be less black market, because the product will be better. The product will be more cost effective. The responsibilities are going to be shared. So if we look at it, it's better. And then leads also for other things: more operators, better selection. As we saw in some of the slides, it's a cost entry to be in the Dutch market is quite high. But if you start dividing the costs and start making a framework where providers can support operators, and they need to, because they are licensed or certified in a way that is the focus is also on them, and the operator is not the only one working with a regulator, will lead for more operators trying to enter the market, will lead for more operators to find ideas to have a better product. And finally, security and compliance. Something that operators need to work this by themselves almost all the time. Lots of audits, lots of checks, lots of certification works that we, as a certified provider, can always give to the market. I just put this here that it's basically our commitment as Altenar to support operators in a way that we know that the ecosystem is going to work, in a way that we can bring to the market some innovation, we can bring security, we can bring better infrastructures, we can bring compliance, and we can also bring experience. And looking at the Dutch market, it's a market that is hard to enter because operators are too much focused in trying just to survive, trying just to not have any issues, trying just to adapt to regulations. And maybe you guys need some support from our side just to focus in the business and not needing to look either to the sportsbook or either at the offering of other game providers. Any questions? Yes?
Is your B2B solution included applying for local license instead of your respective partner?
Sorry?
Is your B2B solution included a service which you are going to apply for local license instead of respective partner?
So
let me repeat the question.
Exactly.
We have the relevant certifications, but the operator will be licensed.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
mean,
It's not a white label solution as such.
do you support?
If we support, exactly. It was in one of the slides. One of the things that we do, mainly in the Dutch market, because we need to work together with you, because the data reporting needs to work. The offering needs to be matching the requirements. The front end also has certain specifications. So from the moment that an operator chooses us, we start working together to make a compliant solution. As it is now, we support with certification, but we also support during the licensing application, because we do the technical support to demonstrate that you, as an operator, will have the sportsbook working as it should. So the answer is yes, but supporting more in the background as an advisory role and configuring the sportsbook in a way that you're going to be happy, and you can do the application knowing that that side, you don't need to look at it, basically. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
That's it.
Well, I have a question for you.
Okay.
I mean, it's clear that you're in favor of a B2B licensing, and at least that's what I interpret from your speech. But that's interesting to hear. But what do you think it will actually happen? What's your take on that?
We know that for a fact that probably will happen because it's an extra fee, right? The regulator, once stops consuming all the operators and the taxes reach a certain level, there will always be a fee that they need to search for, and it will come to the B2Bs. But also from the other side, and that's why I mentioned good examples, is that we, as the entire ecosystem, we need to think that we need to drive the conversation in a way that we don't go to the part that they try to make B2B providers enforcers or B2Cs, trying to review their operations. It shouldn't be that obligation, but should be an obligation of working together to make sure that the market is actually running smoothly.
Yeah, it should be separate frameworks so that the responsibilities are also
separate,
between
but
operators and suppliers,
colliding together in order to have a good system. If it will happen or not, there's nothing saying that it will happen in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years' time, but the reality is that most of Europe is moving to B2B licensing. We don't have it yet, we're ready for it, and for now what we do is support the operators to be fully compliant. But of course, it would be better for us to have to be fully compliant, for the operators not need to think that they rely on third parties for that. They just need to know that we will have a license, and that would be good from their side.
Okay, but I guess we need to get the famous crystal ball again then. We need the famous crystal ball to know.
Exactly. Okay.
Do you have an existing example of B2B partnership in Netherlands?
Let me just repeat the question, because we are actually recording these sessions, and only Magno and I have a microphone, so I'm going to... So the question is, if there is an existing B2B partnership in the Netherlands, right?
B2C.
Yeah,
an operator, yes. We have an operator working with us, and hopefully after this meeting we might have one more or two, so the expectations are those ones.
I have a question. So you talked about the cost of managing integrations. Now, I understand if you're an aggregator or you're an operator working with an aggregator, the cost will be lower because you have one API that gives you access to a number of theoretically B2B licensed suppliers. However, that may work for the sportsbook model. I'm not sure how that works for the casino model, because then you'd be expecting casino suppliers to then all go through one API. And you referenced Denmark as a great example, but Denmark have an incredibly high technical obligation for suppliers with a safe reporting. So how would inherently more complex integrations reduce the technical cost for operators who want a direct relationship?
When I was mentioning that is exactly because that part, then the operators will stop having part of the full responsibility. At the moment, you have the full cake. In the Netherlands, you're responsible for everything. Like you said, in Denmark, we created a division. Suppliers need to cover all of their requirements, every 3 months I need to send 2 reports to 2 new certifications for Denmark, for example. And in the past, what was happening was the operator was asking us to do the certifications. We would do the certifications. They would have to do their certifications on top of that. And then they would be complying with the Danish requirements. Nowadays, we take care of that part. The operator doesn't need to be concerned of that. So that does reduce the costs if you think about it, and reduces also, like I was telling you, the full cake gets divided. So it's less things that you as an operator need to worry about.
Okay. Any other questions, or? I guess then we can wrap up. But well, within 2 minutes, we will start with the next presentation of Jannis for Bragg. We will get you set up with the microphone, and we'll just wait for 2 more minutes to maybe other people want to join, and we will continue with the second presentation.
Okay. Thank you then.
Thank you, Magno.